You're listening to Straight from the Drafts. I'm your host Nao, social media strategist, business cheerleader and chronic oversharer. In this weekly voice note from me, you can expect actionable insights and behind the scenes stories, my best tips and all the encouragement, all with the goal of helping you plan your content with confidence so that you can turn your goals into reality with the support from your social media. So grab a drink, pop in your headphones and let's get into this week's episode. Hello. I'm coming to you with a chatty episode this week, and it's going to be one of the more Nao than Social by Nao episodes. And I thought I'd share some of the stories from my employed life before I started as a social media manager, because as per usual, I have dreamt up this episode based on what I enjoy listening to from others, and I love a good story time. I love behind the scenes stuff and being nosy, what can I say? But I didn't want to make it one big let's bitch about employed life, because that feels a bit grumpy. And also because, and I think I've said this before, I don't actually have any regrets about my past career choices. I think that despite me being miserable for a good portion of my corporate life, I wouldn't change it. I learned so much that I actually think has really set me up, both in business and in life, to be honest. So this episode will be sharing all the wild stories from those years of my life, but also looking at what they taught me as well. So if you're looking for social media insights and to learn about strategy, this is not the episode. But if you're a fellow business owner thinking about going self-employed or just plain nosy, then keep listening. And I'm going to start this episode off with one of the biggest takeaways from my time as a corporate girly, and something that I was obviously just raised to believe anyway, but I really saw the importance of once I started working, and that's that respect should always be a two-way street, and that people's skills really matter. So let me tell you a story that sticks out so clearly to me from when I was a training accountant. I think it was possibly my second year at the firm. It could have been towards the end of the first year. And me and the team that I was working with were doing a late shift at the office. We actually spent very little time at the office back then. I've no idea what it's like these days post-COVID, but most of the time that we actually spent was out at clients' offices and we did the work from there. So usually office time meant that it was towards the end of a project and it was quite intense because the deadlines were getting closer and closer and we were sort of wrapping things up. So that's just a bit of context. And I was sat next to a colleague who, she was the same level as me, but a graduate, so a few years older. And our manager for that project was sat on the same bank of desks, but one seat down from me. So the other girl that worked with me was in between. And I'll never forget this night, we were both knackered. We were all knackered. It was getting really late. And I lived about a half an hour train ride outside from Manchester where the office was at the time. And I'd been told that I would be staying later than my last train. There was no chance of me making my last train. So I was already not super thrilled because that meant at the earliest that I was probably leaving after 11 p.m. I think my last train at the time was somewhere between like 10:30 and 11. And the train was expensive as it was because the commute into the office, I didn't do it all the time, so I couldn't get like a pass that made it a bit cheaper, but still the train was still literally like a third of the price of getting a taxi back because I live so far away. So I was on track for a late night, an expensive journey home, and to be honest, the vibes were just not good. So this manager was also known for being a bit of a flapper. She didn't deal well with pressure, so at this stage in the project, she really wasn't any fun to work with. And getting round to the story, she was on the phone at her desk, so next to the other girl, one seat down from me. She was on the phone. I'm not sure who it was to, whether it was another member of staff or if it was her husband, but she was literally out loud bitching about the person sat to my left, so the person sat next to her. She wasn't trying to be subtle or saying things in a passive-aggressive way. It was just straight up complaining about the work that my colleague had delivered. And it was so awkward. And we kind of looked at each other like, is this really happening? Like, is she really saying all of this while sat next to you? And my colleague cried, like not a full-on sob, but we were tired and it was really awful. And to be honest, like, this wasn't the first time that she'd been a crappy manager. Like, she didn't treat the team well. As I say, she was a flapper, and like anytime she was panicked, that got taken out on the team. So it was a bit of a tip of the iceberg situation, but she was sat at her laptop, literally like typing, doing her work, while tears rolled down her face. It was so sad, and to be honest, I'm pretty sure that I did the same at some point that night. I don't remember what triggered me, but I was most likely just completely fed up. And that might sound like quite an extreme example, like, oh, we sat typing, crying at your laptop while someone literally like bitches about you sat next to you. But it's probably just one of many examples that I could share from the years that I worked at that firm. But part of me is still glad that I experienced it, and the many other occasions like it, because that job, more than any other that I've had, I think, showed me the importance of culture and appreciating your team and team morale. I worked on some real shitters of project in the 4 years that I was there, but some weren't as bad purely because of the team. Everyone banded together, we all knew the late nights were crap and the clients didn't speak to us very nicely, but within the team, we tried to keep each other's spirits up. And it was the same when I was waitressing. The whole vibe of the shift could depend on which supervisor was on shift that day or which chefs were in the kitchen. One bad egg, particularly in a position of power, can really have a huge impact. And likewise, to be fair, that also means that really good managers can have a real impact too. So the role that I started in when I left accounting and got my first role in digital marketing, I remember my manager to be reaching out on LinkedIn before I started to welcome me to the team, to let me know that it was going to be a dress down day in the office when I started, so that I knew what to wear. And it probably took no more than 5 minutes out of her day. It was quite a short message, but I really, really appreciated it. And now that I've got a small team of my own, respect is obviously super important to me. And I wholeheartedly believe that a team is more productive and do their best work when they feel appreciated, respected, and most importantly, safe in the workplace. Because that kind of atmosphere breeds better communication and more collaboration. And that combination is just gold. The second thing that I've really taken into business ownership life is that everything is figure-outable, even if it's scary. So again, back in accounting days, I think it was literally like my second week of work there. So we're going back to when I very first started. I flew out to do a project in Texas. As I said, we often did the work from clients' offices. So this was part of a larger group that historically had always been based in the UK, but for the first time, we were going out to visit their like sister companies, like the group companies in America. Now, this was way before Bali. I was literally 18, and the furthest I think I'd gone without parents was either a flight to Vienna or Barcelona with my sister. I think we'd done either one or both, maybe just one actually, one of those trips together before this, but I don't think I'd ever done a solo flight at this stage. And now I'm even doubting whether I'd done that one with my sister. But anyway, the person that I was on this trip with, like my manager for this project, lost their passport. And they only realised this as they were packing up their room to go to the airport. So we'd been out there for 2 weeks. In the middle of the 2 weeks, we'd like changed hotel and visited a different part of Texas. And yeah, so we'd come back to where we were staying for like the main bit of the work, and we were packing up, all ready to fly home, and suddenly I was doing the flight solo. They couldn't find their passport, and the nearest embassy was really far away, and also I think this was a weekend and it didn't open until Monday, so they were stuck for a couple more days and I was flying home. I was also so new that I didn't have a company credit card yet, which everyone got at that firm for expenses. So like if you were working away, like in that scenario, you could cover your meals, etc. on the card. It was all like approved and reviewed, etc. So you couldn't, take the piss. But mine hadn't arrived yet. I also hadn't had my first payday yet. So I was completely poor. I had no money and I was very reliant on my manager and them having the business expense card. So I'd never flown solo, let alone internationally with a connection in between. I didn't have any money, and that journey home felt quite intimidating. But I did it. I didn't tell my parents until I got home that I'd done that journey on my own because I thought that they'd probably worry, but it was figure-outable. I asked airport staff when I needed to, and I navigated my way home. And honestly, it gave me so much confidence for future flights. So my sister did a year abroad. She worked in Austria for a year and I visited her twice, I think, maybe on my own. And I did, obviously, the flight to Bali a few years later. I've flown solo to New York and back as well since. Of course, it's not just about being able to fly solo and the confidence to navigate an airport, but I do think that that's just one story that kind of gives the example of everything is figure-outable and is definitely a helpful mindset to have when it comes to being a business owner, because there's always something that comes up that you have to figure out, and once you kind of work out one challenge, then the next one just crops up. That's just life. But knowing that you can figure things out, you can ask for help, you can Google, it just helps stay calm. Because if you're navigating a tough situation, panicking definitely doesn't add anything. It just makes everything a whole lot worse. So knowing that everything is figure-outable, that was one of my key lessons from quite early on in my corporate days that I definitely have kept with me as a business owner. Okay, this one's quite a funny one, but a good one. Senior leaders are just people who like a brew or a Jaeger bomb as well. Someone's job title isn't a reason to feel intimidated. And I think that's probably self-explanatory. But when you realise that everyone appreciates a good cup of tea, or you've been on a night out with the most senior people in the room and you've seen them look just as messy as the first years, you start to realise that we're all just people. Just because someone's got a fancy job title doesn't mean I need to be intimidated by them. I can smile and be polite, deliver my work, make them a brew even though I don't actually drink tea or coffee myself, and talk to them like a person. Again, it comes back to that communication and collaboration point. If we all get on, it's better for the work, it's better for morale. Where this was probably most helpful was kind of realising that within the audit team internally, and then being able to apply it to the clients who were horrible. So the most grumpy, angry finance team members who loved intimidating the younger team members became less scary when I kind of thought, you're just a guy. And this is nothing to do with work, but if anyone intimidates you, just remember, everyone gets stomach bugs. And this is kind of like an intrusive thought that I probably just should keep to myself, but once you think about a person having the runs or being sick, that is so humbling. Nobody is too good for a dodgy stomach at least once in their life. And once you've kind of imagined someone bent over a toilet bowl being sick, they become far less scary, trust me. But in a work context, if I could see, let's say, a family photo on their desk, I'd think, okay, well, maybe you slept bad last night because your kids kept you up. Maybe you stepped on Lego this morning. And I know that you stay late at the office, which means you're probably going home and reheating your tea and not sitting down to eat with your family. And that's kind of sad. And doesn't that make them seem less scary already? And I think there's two ways that this kind of shows up in business life. First, being industry experts and the leaders that you very much put on a pedestal. I don't necessarily picture people being sick anymore. I'm kind of past that now and just understand that everyone is human without having to go through that. But I don't feel too scared to talk to them at networking events or comment on their content or reply to stories because they're people. And who doesn't just love a compliment or engagement on their content? And taking that first step helps to build relationships, meaning that you don't spend forever on the outside looking in, and you can get in the room with these people that you most look up to. An example of this is I went on Alice Benham's retreat last January for the first time, so January 2024. I went on her retreat for the first time then. I've since done another retreat this January. I'm going on a workation with her later this year. And I just think she's a great human. But once upon a time, she was one of those people that I very much only knew from the outside. Oh my gosh, like what an expert, amazing human. And I still think she's an amazing human, and oh my god, what an expert. Alice will always have that presence, and yeah, all of that still remains true. But I also now have more of a relationship with her. Like, I've spent one-on-one time with her. I've talked to her about the business. I've talked to her about random crap out that has nothing to do with business life, just human connection. And it's because I wasn't scared to reach out that very first time. And I went to her small business event and I said, Alice, we need a picture, because we both had bows in our hair. It's that kind of just breaking down that initial wall between you and the people that you look up to, and realise that you can get in a room with them, you can have a conversation with them, because they're just people, and they're amazing people, but they are just people. And P.S. Alice, I don't think you will be listening to this, but if you do, I haven't pictured you being sick in order to make that first step, I promise. Oh, why do I out myself like this on the internet? Second thing, let's move on. Working with clients. And I'd say, oh God, I've got so much regret. I'd say this is more where I'm still working on this. So I worry about disturbing people or not wanting to get on their nerves, and I don't always put ideas forward or nudge people where I should. But again, clients are people too. And on the whole, I've worked with super lovely people that understand that life throws a curveball sometimes, or they don't care if I turn up to calls with no makeup on, or I'm in my gym stuff sometimes. So that's another people-y one. But again, I do think people's skills really matter. So it's one to catch yourself out on. If you're putting someone on a pedestal, make sure that you're not missing out on any opportunities just because you are slightly intimidated by someone. And that might be intimidated in a good way. I suppose the better word is admiration. So however well-deserved that admiration is, don't cut yourself off from that person, because we're all just people and you will be able to find something in common with them. Okay, I had a few more of these written down, but let's just go for one more to finish because this episode is getting on the long side again. Actually, let's whiz through the final four that I've made notes on, and I'll add a few quick thoughts. Particularly, we can pretty much skip through the first two, I think. So, number one, true friendship can get you through anything, and you don't need to deal with everything on your own. Cute. So true. Still completely stand by this. And I think having friends that you can trust and who get it is so underrated. So having small business pals, having friends outside of work. And I think episode 2 actually links quite nicely to that one. So I'll leave that one there. Number 2, it's okay not to follow the typical path. Trust your gut and do what's right for you. If you haven't listened to the previous episode that I did on my squiggly career, then definitely give that one a listen. I think that was episode 3. Number 3 in the list, plans change. Become resilient enough to adapt when they do. This is on a very similar vein to the everything is figure-outable lesson, but I had these big plans of my corporate girly career that just didn't pan out. And I was also in a relationship in the middle of my time at that accounting firm that I'd made all these plans around, even down to like moving from Manchester down to London, and it ended really out of the blue. And all of those plans ended with it, so I felt quite bereft at the time, not just of that relationship, but the future that I'd imagined myself having. Obviously, thank goodness, lol, that was not meant to work out, but that was a real moment for me where I just stopped making plans that were long term for a very, very long time, because I felt really burned by that and I didn't want to feel let down again. But now I think I'm just at peace with knowing that plans can change and it's okay for them to change. That's just life. But it's more about being resilient and adaptable enough to deal with it when it does. And finally, duality can exist. You can feel totally shit and be making the best memories of your life all at once. I really struggled with my mental health for a good chunk of my employed years. I think I've touched on that before. But yeah, there were some really rough patches and incredible memories sprinkled in there. So that one really hits hard. And kind of combining two stories I've mentioned in this episode, actually, when I did my solo flight to New York, that was just after the breakup that I just mentioned. And I was super miserable at work at the time, to the point where I was actually sent home from a client site once, and someone had to babysit me in the office instead because my manager was worried about me. And that New York trip was planned with the ex. And instead of Christmas presents that year, we'd bought ice hockey tickets for the trip. And when he broke things off, I thought, I think I still want to go. He didn't. Not that I'd have probably given him the tickets, to be honest. I was very angry at the time. But yeah, he did very much say, like, you take the tickets and still go if you want to. And it just so happened that one of my friends had the same week booked off work with no plans, which was so rare because we tended to book our holidays in 12 to 18 months ahead at that place. It was wild. So yeah, we went on this girls' trip to New York, and the trip was so full of joy because we both really needed it. We were both completely devastated and sad for actually quite similar reasons at the time, but equally had the absolute best holiday, and it's still such a core memory for us. There were a few moments like that through the years where on the outside life looked amazing, and of course those individual moments were, but my overall state at that time I wouldn't say was happy. And I think that's a really good reminder that you never know what someone is going through. So looking at someone's highlights on Instagram or someone's success in business, you shouldn't compare, because you have no clue what their behind the scenes looks like. And equally, it's a good reminder to be super grateful for the things that you do have in your life, because they're most likely to be what someone else is looking for. I think staying grateful and not letting yourself get swept up in other people's success is massively important as a business owner, particularly one who spends time on social media. And that is everything for today's episode. So instead of ending on one cheesy quote, let's just recap those lessons. People skills matter, and respect should always be a two-way street. Everything is figure-outable, even if it feels scary. Even the most senior leaders are just people, and someone's job title isn't a reason to feel intimidated. True friendship can get you through anything. You don't need to deal with everything on your own. It's okay not to follow the typical path. Trust your gut and do what's right for you. Plans change. Be resilient enough to adapt when they do. And finally, duality can exist. Focus on and stay grateful for the good in your own life, because you have got no idea what someone else might be going through. That's all of the key lessons that I've taken with me from my employed years. I'm sure there are more. But if you did enjoy this episode and haven't already, then be sure to hit follow and maybe send your favourite episode to a friend to spread the cheesy quotes far and wide. But for now, I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye!